In everything that exists, there are patterns. Atoms, galaxies, sound waves, magnetic fields, they all follow invisible structures that repeat themselves. Nature doesn't improvise. It replicates what works. And the same goes for consciousness. If you pay close attention, you'll notice. People who vibrate differently in the world tend to share similar habits. They are individuals who, without knowing each other, from different parts of the world, in different contexts, live with energetic coherence. And that coherence follows a pattern. Just as sound obeys frequencies, the soul also vibrates on specific wavelengths. And when someone reaches a certain level of presence, of truth, of alignment with their own center, the field changes. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche is connected to a collective unconscious, a field where symbols, truths, and universal experiences repeat, generation after generation. And those who tap into this field vibrate differently. In this video, you're going to understand the 13 habits that these highly vibrational people have in common. And by the end of this video, if you feel that something inside you recognizes these patterns, don't be surprised. You're not alone. Truth, when lived, echoes. And those who live in it end up vibrating in unison with everything that's real. Some people wake up and immediately throw themselves into the world. They turn on their phones, speed up their thoughts, connect with everything, except themselves. But those who start vibrating higher make a different choice. They align first, then act. Before offering presence to the world, they return to inhabit it within. It's there, in that inner stillness, that something essential organizes itself. The mind slows down, the breath becomes a path, and the body starts to remember it's not just a vehicle, it's part of the listening. In this case, meditation isn't about disconnecting, it's about tuning in. It's like stopping to hear your own frequency after a day full of noise. Visualization comes into this space not as a technique of control, but as a compass. Symbolic images emerge, bringing direction, clearing excess, revealing what was hidden. And the first sign of someone who lives in this more conscious frequency is this. They use meditation and visualization as intimate practices of vibrational alignment. These become part of their routine, like taking a deep breath before diving in. Jung saw active imagination as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious, a way for the psyche to reorganize itself from the inside out. And that's exactly what happens here. When you visualize with true intention, you access a part of yourself that already knows the way. You don't need to understand everything clearly. You need to trust what you feel. This practice doesn't require absolute silence or a perfect setting. It fits in the car, before a meeting, in the shower, in the pause between tasks. What matters isn't how long you do it. It's how present you are when you do. Over time, the difference becomes clear. You react less, perceive more. You disconnect from chaotic environments more easily. You feel when you're out of sync, and you know how to return. The vibration adjusts because the channel has been cleared. The mind, on its own, scatters. But when the body, intention, and presence meet in a single moment of listening, something shifts. And life, which once seemed out of control, starts to move in rhythm with you. The second habit found in highly vibrational people is that they seek solitude as a tool for psychic reorganization. This isn't a social preference, nor an introverted personality trait. It's an energetic gesture, a form of care that comes from the awareness that one's own presence needs space to breathe. Being with others requires giving. Giving requires a center. And the center is sometimes only found in absolute silence. These people choose to be alone, like someone returning home. They understand that being with others is important, but being with oneself is vital, and that there are times when the noise of the world blocks all real listening. Jung saw the process of individuation as a deeply solitary movement, because contact with the self doesn't happen in applause or approval. It happens in stillness, in the pause, in the absence of distraction. And that's why those who vibrate high retreat. They disappear sometimes. They protect themselves without building walls. They decline invitations without over-explaining. In that intimate space, where no mask is needed, emotions reorganize. Intuition flows again. Clarity shows up without being called. The body aligns with the mind, and the mind with the soul. Solitude becomes a place of deep listening. Everything that got buried in the rush of the day appears there. And the most beautiful part, without judgment, without the rush to fix it, just the intention to perceive. Those who vibrate this way have learned that silence is fertile ground. It's where what truly matters is able to grow, and those who hold that space within themselves return to the world cleaner, more whole, lighter. The third habit found in highly vibrational people is that they treat the body as an emotional and energetic temple, not in speech, but in daily practice. They understand, in their bodies, not just in their minds, that every pain has a source. Every tension tells a story, and ignoring physical signals is the same as silencing the soul. This relationship with the body doesn't come from a worship of aesthetics or fear of illness. It comes from the awareness that the physical is the foundation of vibration. Matter is the support of spirit. If the body is noisy, energy doesn't flow. If it's exhausted, nothing sustains presence. That's why this kind of person starts eating with more intention, sleeping with more respect, breathing with more attention. They understand the body as language, an open channel between the inner and outer worlds, and everything flows through it. Often, before knowing something is wrong, they feel it in their stomach, or their back, or in the rhythm of their sleep. They don't need major diagnoses. The body gives a warning. The field tightens. The breath shortens. The heart races. And when they notice these signs, they stop, listen, adjust. Jung used to say that symptoms are ways the unconscious finds to express itself. And in that sense, the body is the first to carry the message. Pain, fatigue, compulsion, rigidity, all of it has symbolic roots. Those who are more awakened have learned not to fight the symptom, but to translate it. This act of listening to the body changes everything. Eating becomes a ritual of reconnection. Movement, be it dancing, walking, or stretching, stops being a chore and becomes a release of flow. Even bathing becomes a moment of energetic, not just physical, cleansing. And the most curious part, the more aligned the body is, the clearer the intuition, the lighter the presence, the more coherent the field. The body is not a detail, it's the antenna. Vibrational people don't neglect that antenna. They know that when the body falls ill, energy has already given a warning. If it shuts down, the psyche is trying to get attention, and caring for it is not vanity. It's tuning the instrument. Because at the end of the day, the body is the place where the soul resides, and treating it with respect is the first act of vibrational care one can offer. The fourth habit found in highly vibrational people is that they cultivate written self-reflection as a practice of inner truth. Writing is not a hobby, it's a form of listening. It's where what once felt scattered in the mind takes shape, and where the invisible starts becoming readable. There's a difference between thinking and writing. Thinking is often circular. The mind returns to the same place, repeats patterns, avoids discomfort. But when words hit the page, there's nowhere left to hide. The sentence reveals what the thought tried to erase. Writing demands presence, and those who vibrate high already understand that only truth sustains frequency. These people make a habit of opening a notebook, not to recount their day, but to discover what hasn't been said aloud. They write like someone shining a flashlight inward. The text becomes a way of perceiving what's operating in the unconscious. A misunderstood dream, a strange emotional reaction, a sudden insight. It all goes onto the page, because that's where symbols reveal themselves. Carl Jung spoke of the importance of giving expression to inner images. He used writing and drawing as ways to dialogue with psychic content that doesn't show up easily. He called this active imagination, not aimless fantasy, but a channel of communication with the self. And that's what happens when someone writes in a state of listening. A conversation begins to emerge between the ego and something deeper. At first, the writing seems chaotic. Disconnected sentences, scattered thoughts. But over time, something starts to organize. Patterns repeat. Fears are named. Repressed desires surface without asking permission. And most importantly, clarity appears. Clarity that no conversation could provide. Because in the notebook, there's no need to explain. Just to be honest. This practice requires no style or literary talent. It only asks for a willingness to meet yourself, day after day, even if the meeting is uncomfortable, and often it is. But that discomfort doesn't scare someone who's begun integrating their shadow. Writing becomes a ritual, a form of individuation. With each page, something aligns. The soul listens to itself, the psyche breathes, and the vibration shifts, not because of a miracle, but because someone finally told the truth. The fifth habit found in highly vibrational people is that they are selective about the content they consume. Not as someone who shuts out the world, but as someone who understands that everything that enters shapes what vibrates. These people pay attention to what they read, what they watch, what they listen to, because they know that every word, image, and sound acts as a symbol. And symbol, as Carl Jung taught, is the native language of the unconscious. Nothing is just a video. Nothing is just a meme. Everything leaves a mark. Vibrational awareness begins there, realizing that the field doesn't just feed on food, but on stimuli, on meaning, on presence. And that shallow, repetitive, or noisy content doesn't just inform, it fragments, distracts, dulls. That's why these people choose more deliberately. They don't chase quick fixes or consume out of anxiety. They seek what sustains, what expands, what reorganizes their view. A book can be a mirror. A podcast can be a trigger. A video can be a reminder of what was already known but forgotten. The point isn't to only consume elevated content. It's to be aware of what's being absorbed, to notice the subtle impact after hours of scrolling through a timeline or watching something that leaves a heaviness in the body, and not to ignore that effect, to feel it, to process it, to shift course if needed. Jung said, the unconscious mind sees everything, and when that everything is made up of disconnected, aggressive, or trivial stimuli, the unconscious reacts. It gets confused, scattered, shut down. The opposite is also true. When exposed to images with symbolic depth, the unconscious reorganizes. And with it, the whole field rises. Vibrational people use content as a tuning tool. They know that in times of excess, true healing lies in curation. And that curation is intimate, intuitive, ethical. They don't follow the algorithm. They follow the inner call. This relationship with content isn't rigid, but it is conscious. Sometimes, a song is enough. Sometimes, silence is needed. Sometimes, a piece of writing awakens something long forgotten. The field responds, and they listen. For these people, consumption isn't distraction. It's vibration. Every choice shapes what is emanated, and the soul, having spent too much time in noise, learns to seek what sustains its truth. The sixth habit found in highly vibrational people is that they hold silence with a force that speaks. They are people who, even when quiet, shift the energy in a room. The curious thing is, this isn't a rational choice. It's not a tactic. It's a state. When they're at peace internally, the vibration settles before a single word is spoken. And often, that vibration is clearer than any speech. These people are in no rush to fill the silence. They don't try to rescue discomfort with polite phrases or rushed opinions. They know that, in certain moments, what lingers in the air is more important than what's being said. So they hold it. That silence isn't distant or cold. It's full. It carries intention, listening, presence. And that's why it's felt. Some calm down around it. Others withdraw. Because when the noise stops, what was hidden comes to the surface. Carl Jung spoke about the power of unconscious attitudes. Those things we emit without realizing, but that others pick up on. The inferior function of the personality, for example, manifests without the ego's control. And often, it's in that space where the truest messages come through. That's the space where these people communicate. They don't always know how to explain what they feel, but their body speaks for them. The rhythm of their breathing shifts the energy. The way they look carries compassion or boundary. A simple gesture holds a subtle ethics. They're not performative, they're whole. And because of that, each silence becomes symbolic. There are moments when a pause says more than a thesis. There are presences that don't need to raise their voice to be heard. And there are people who, even without speaking, make others hear what they've been avoiding. That silence isn't a technique. It's a consequence. It arises when the energy is coherent, and coherence sustains more than rhetoric. Those who live this way don't enter debates to win, because there's nothing left to prove. In this case, silence isn't absence. It's a choice. In environments where everyone talks too much, that quiet presence becomes a mirror. And what it reflects is simple. Truth doesn't need to shout. The seventh habit found in highly vibrational people is that they care for their energy as one would protect something sacred. But they do so with simplicity, without the need for spectacle. To them, the energetic field is a living extension of the soul. And as such, it deserves constant attention. It's not about collecting techniques. It's not about spiritual trends. It's about listening. When their energy starts to feel heavy, they notice. When a space drains them, they step back. When there's imbalance, they work to restore it. And that care doesn't come from fear. It comes from intimacy with the invisible. These people incorporate energetic practices into daily life, like someone tending to their own room, an herbal bath before bed, Incense burned not out of habit, but intention. A crystal placed where intuition says it belongs. Music that clears a space. A drop of essential oil on the neck on a heavy day. None of it is mandatory. All of it is symbolic language. Carl Jung believed that the collective unconscious expresses itself through living symbols. Images, objects, rituals. To him, the symbol wasn't superstition, but the expression of something beyond logic. And that's how these people operate. They interact with the invisible not out of dogma, but resonance. They recognize the signs and respond. A bath isn't just a bath. It's a reset. The sun on their skin isn't just warmth. It's realignment. Walking barefoot isn't about aesthetics. It's about connection with something words can't explain, but the body understands. Everything gains symbolic weight. Their energy isn't tied to technique. It's tied to intention. They don't follow rigid formulas. They feel what works. They adjust. Change rituals. Honor what the moment calls for. They aren't defined by any one practice, but they stay balanced through them. This care isn't a secret, but it isn't a performance either. It's discreet, personal, as routine as brushing their teeth. They do it because they need to stay centered, because they've seen what happens when they don't. Those who live with that kind of energetic sensitivity understand that the invisible doesn't need to be proven. It just needs to be lived. And that what's unseen but felt can be more powerful than any spoken word. That's why they tend to their vibration like tuning an instrument, because they know it's not about appearing enlightened. It's about staying in tune with what they carry. The eighth habit found in highly vibrational people is that they are always seeking to become more conscious versions of themselves. They don't settle into what they already know, nor hide behind what they've already healed. There's a serene restlessness that moves them. They don't want to seem at peace. They want to be true. That movement has no end. There's no finish line, diploma, or enlightenment badge. What exists is process, cycles, relapses, reconstruction. They've already realized that awakening doesn't make them immune to mistakes. It just makes them quicker to notice when they've drifted off course. This vigilance isn't paranoia, it's maturity. It's knowing the ego always tries to take back control, and that old wounds, even when healed, can ache again. But instead of hiding that, they observe, embrace, adjust. Carl Jung said the goal of life isn't perfection, but individuation. To become who you are, fully. And that path is not linear. It requires facing the shadow, challenging the ego, breaking old roles. People with high emotional and psychic vibration know that light doesn't erase the dark, it just reveals where it is. That's why they're not ashamed to rethink decisions, to ask for forgiveness, to begin again. They know that every time they realign, their vibration becomes more refined. And that coherence comes from the constant effort to observe themselves honestly. They don't live under the illusion that they've made it. They know they're always in transition. And because of that, they don't judge those who are still stumbling. They've been there. Maybe they still are. The difference now is they recognize when they're drifting, and they have the tools to return. This pursuit isn't frantic. It doesn't come from lack, but from a desire for depth. They want to stand with more wholeness, to be clearer in their relationships, more present, more precise in their words, more sincere in their actions. Not out of idealism, but out of integrity. And perhaps most importantly, they don't seek this awareness to be admired. They seek it because they can no longer live in dissonance. Because their soul has already tasted truth, and refuses to go back to shallow living. Those who live this way carry a vibration that doesn't rely on appearances, rituals, or speeches. It's a vibration born from intimacy with their own contradictions. And for that reason, it has depth, it has soul, it has coherence. The ninth habit found in highly vibrational people is that they set boundaries with presence, not aggression. They don't need to raise their voice to be heard, nor do they need to harden their body to protect their soul. Their authority comes from a deeper place, where truth no longer negotiates with fear. These people don't avoid conflict, but they don't provoke it either. They've realized, through experience, that protecting their own energy is a form of respect, for themselves and for others, and that a lack of boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-sabotage. The boundaries they draw don't come with long explanations or anxious justifications. They come with clarity, with a steady body, with grounded presence. It's the kind of no that doesn't need punctuation. The energy has already spoken. Carl Jung spoke about the danger of denying the shadow and projecting it onto others. People who haven't learned to set boundaries often do just that. They suppress discomfort, tolerate too much, then explode. But those who have done the work of shadow integration know how to recognize discomfort before it spills over. They take a stand before anger has to do it for them. This kind of boundary setting doesn't cut, it defines. And there's a big difference between the two. Cutting is reactive. Defining is presence. An organized vibration doesn't need to shout to be felt. It shows in a body that doesn't flinch, in a gaze that doesn't avoid, in a posture that says, from here inward, only what respects is allowed. These people have also learned how to leave, to walk away when the energy of a space no longer welcomes them. They do it with dignity, without drama, without needing to be understood, because understanding is no longer a demand. It's a bonus. They don't set boundaries out of fear of being hurt. They do it because they finally realize that their own peace is a territory worth protecting, and that maintaining imbalanced relationships is costly. The body feels it. The vibration plummets. Truth goes silent. That's why they learn to say no without guilt, to recognize when something has become too small, to leave, even with longing, to choose silence where they once insisted on dialogue. And they do all this without shutting down, simply by respecting themselves. When someone's energy is whole, their boundaries are clear, even in a smile. And those who vibrate this way teach, without saying a word, that presence is also a boundary. The 10th habit found in highly vibrational people is that they channel pain into symbolic service. They don't romanticize suffering, nor do they deny it. What they do is give form to what hurt, transforming it into something that, even in silence, can become a bridge for others. These people have been through collapse, not once, but several times. They know what it's like to lose their footing, their direction, their faith. But they also know what it's like to walk through that night and emerge holding something in their hands. Something that can't be explained, but can be felt. A denser presence, a deeper gaze, a word that truly lands. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And these people have done just that. They sat with discomfort, breathed through the chaos, held their wounds until those wounds had something to teach. And that's why pain no longer screams. It guides. This transformation doesn't happen in grand gestures. Often, it starts with something small, listening more closely, offering unexpected kindness, giving generously without expecting anything back. What once wounded, now leads. What once seemed like just trauma becomes a compass. They share their experiences without posing as examples. They don't preach about overcoming. They live real presence, and it resonates. When someone comes close, they feel they can breathe. They feel there's space for what still hurts. Because those who've been broken don't demand that others be whole. This symbolic service can be subtle. A piece of art that moves, a conversation that welcomes, a silence that holds. It might show up in work that inspires, in a friendship that heals, in a life choice that carries meaning. It doesn't need a stage. It needs intention. And that intention reorganizes everything. What once felt like emptiness becomes fertile ground. What once felt like loss reveals direction. Pain, once integrated, doesn't vanish. It becomes an ally. These people know they'll never return to who they were before the suffering. And they don't want to. Because it was precisely in that rupture that they discovered parts of themselves they never would have accessed in times of ease. Turning pain into presence isn't a gift. It's a choice. Repeated, day after day. And those who make that choice vibrate differently, no longer to protect themselves, but to offer. The next habit commonly found in highly vibrational people is that they read the room with a tuned-in, almost imperceptible intuition. They don't need much to sense what's going on. Sometimes, just entering a space, a glance, a pause, a scent in the air, and they already know what isn't being said. This perception doesn't come from logical thought. It comes from another place. A subtler kind of listening that bypasses direct reasoning and lands whole. The body reacts first. The skin feels it. The breath shifts. There's a density they pick up on, even when words try to keep things light. Jung recognized intuition as one of the 4 primary functions of consciousness, alongside thinking, feeling, and sensing. To him, intuition was the ability to perceive possibilities, meanings, hidden truths, without depending on concrete evidence. And that's exactly what these people do. They sense before they know. They notice the tension hidden behind smiles. They sense when there's disconnection, even if the conversation flows smoothly. They can feel places where the energy is heavy, and others where everything seems to breathe with relief. This sensitivity isn't something they asked for. It's something that happened. as a consequence of living in coherence. Over time, they've learned to trust this kind of reading. In the beginning, they doubted themselves, thought they were overreacting, being paranoid. But after paying the price for ignoring their instinct, they began to respect it. Because it doesn't fail, it warns. That warning can come as sudden discomfort, as fatigue out of nowhere, as an urge to leave a room, change the subject, not walk through that door. The mind might ask for logic, but the soul by then has already decided. This intuition doesn't make them all-knowing, but it makes them attentive, and attentive presence changes everything. They don't force connections. They know when to open up, when to close, when to stay silent, and when to say what no one else wants to hear. It's a kind of wisdom that can't be learned from a book. It's learned by living, by making mistakes, by paying attention. And it stays alive only when the person chooses to listen, even when it's uncomfortable. Because sometimes, truth doesn't shout. It whispers from within, and those who've tuned into that channel don't need proof. They just need to feel. The 12th habit found in highly vibrational people is that they speak with soul, even in the simplest gestures. They don't need big speeches to make an impact. Sometimes, a look, a calm greeting, a compliment that seems to come from a deeper place, is enough. It's as if everything about them carries intention. Their vibration shows up in the in-betweens, in the tone of voice, in the way they listen, in the pause they give before responding. They are fully present, and it shows in every micro-expression. Those around them feel it, even if they can't explain it. This kind of presence isn't something you learn in a workshop. It's built through internal coherence. It's when what you feel, think, and express are in harmony. Jung would say it's when the persona stops being a mask and becomes a channel. Communication then is no longer effort, it's transparency. These people don't speak just to inform. They speak to connect, to hold space, to create inner room in the other. And it's not always with words. It might be the light touch on someone's arm, the silence that doesn't pressure, the laughter that comes at the perfect moment, or the gaze that stays when everyone else has looked away. They carry a kind of energetic coherence that flows through everything. They're present in what they say, but also in what they do. They put care into small tasks, offer attention without rush, listen as if they have time, even when they don't. There's no urgency in their interactions, no need to look spiritual. These are people who've learned to make the everyday sacred. And because of that, wherever they are, the space shifts. Conversations go deeper. Time slows down. They're not trying to teach, but they end up teaching. Through the smallest actions, they show that living with soul doesn't require a special setting. It requires intention, truth in motion. And when that becomes part of their gestures, it reverberates quietly and powerfully. Their energy touches without invading, holds without absorbing, lingers even after they've gone, because what is said with soul keeps vibrating inside those who heard it. And the final habit found in highly vibrational people is that they trust the soul's timing, even when the world demands haste. They don't let themselves be dragged by imposed calendars or external expectations. They've learned, often through pain, that rushing what still needs to mature is to waste the truth that's still forming. They live at a different pace, not out of disorganization, but out of coherence. They know that some inner processes can't be scheduled, that some healing doesn't follow deadlines, that some decisions can only be made after silence, the kind that lingers, unsettles, but eventually reveals. These people don't feel behind just because they're not moving at the same speed as everyone else. They do feel the tension of living in a world that worships speed, but they've stopped letting that shape them, because they've recognized that the soul has its own rhythm, and that all expansion begins in the invisible. Carl Jung spoke of the unconscious as a living, symbolic space that operates with its own logic. He said that the most authentic movements of the psyche can't be forced, only welcomed. When you try to rush individuation, the result isn't evolution, it's fragmentation. That's why these people don't confuse stillness with stagnation. They know the difference between resting and giving up. When something is still germinating, they honor it. When a cycle calls for retreat, they obey. They don't need to look productive all the time. They need to be at peace with the moment. The trust they've developed isn't blind, nor mystical. It's the trust of someone who's seen something bloom long after it was planted, who's reaped fruit after long seasons of silence, who's lived through emptiness without trying to fill it by force, and therefore watched it turn into power. This relationship with time changes everything. They don't pressure others as much, don't demand instant answers. don't rush movements before they're ready. And when they need to wait, they wait fully, with faith, not anxiety. It's not about passivity, it's about conscious surrender. Action when it's time, retreat when it's needed. The ego wants results, the soul wants coherence, and they've chosen to follow the soul. Because those who've learned to trust the invisible timing have understood that true transformation is never rushed, it's built. In silence, in layers, in truth. High vibration isn't a status, it's a state of truth. And that truth isn't something you achieve, it's something you sustain. It's not about getting everything right, nor is it about living in a permanent state of peace. It's about being honest with yourself, even when the world expects a different version. It's about not abandoning yourself just to fit in. It's about choosing yourself, repeatedly, even on the days when it would be easier to hide. If you've made it this far, chances are you already live some of these habits. Even if you don't call them that. Even if you think you're just getting started. But the truth is, no one seeks out this kind of content by accident. Something in you already recognizes this path, already feels that your energy has shifted, that your presence speaks louder than it used to, that your silence now holds a different weight. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And awakening isn't as pretty as it sounds. It's challenging. It's lonely at times. But it's the only path that leads you back home. These 13 habits aren't commandments. They're not steps on a spiritual ladder. They're living practices, clues, footprints left by those who've walked inward, and even without having all the answers, chose to keep going. Because they've realized that true peace doesn't come from the outside. It comes from coherence between what you feel, what you live, and what you choose. You don't have to be vibrating high all the time. That would be inhuman. But you can hold presence even when your light flickers. Because presence doesn't require perfection. It requires surrender. And surrender is what you've done just by being here. So before you leave this video, take a deep breath. Feel what stayed with you. Maybe it was a sentence, a habit, a discomfort, a relief. All of it matters. Because all of it is a sign that something touched where it needed to. If you watched until the end, drop a comment below. I vibrate with my people. That phrase will be our vibrational signal. Whoever writes it, recognizes. Whoever reads it, feels. And whoever made it to the end knows exactly what we're talking about. And if this video touched you in some way, reminded you of who you are, or helped you see something more clearly, consider clicking the thanks button below. Yes, it's a financial contribution, and it makes a real difference. It's that gesture that keeps this channel creating content with presence, awareness, and depth. When you support, this vibration spreads. And together, we reach even more people on this same journey. See you in the next video.